The most powerful man in the universe gets brought back for a new generation. Here's your look at the Mattel Masters of the Universe Revelation He-Man. Defender of Castle Grayskull, protector of the Planeturnia, and guardian of the entire universe, there is nobody stronger, faster, or braver than the mighty He-Man. He is quite simply the most powerful man in the universe, past, present, or future. A vessel for the mysterious power of Grayskull, He-Man inspires the heroes of Eternia to fight the forces of evil. Without He-Man, Eternia and the universe would be doomed. Somewhat of an ironic read-up on the back of He-Man's packaging, before, of course, we get a closer look at He-Man from Master Universe Revelations. I'm taking my tape measure, just wandering it aimlessly around He-Man's head, because we're going to first figure out how tall is the figure. Going to take it right to the very top of his head. He-Man from the new Master Universe Revelations, always wanted to say Origins, the figure stands 8.4, so he's about 8.5 inches in height. We can switch that to centimeters, revealing that Revelation He-Man is 21.3 centimeters tall. And I can already see I'm starting to do this, so apologies in advance if I happen to keep calling it Revelations. I always feel like I want to pluralize it. Masters of the Universe Revelation. Feels like it's coming up just a little bit short. Anyways, speaking of coming up just a little bit short, how's this for a segue? We can move over Revelation He-Man, and we can bring in the Master Universe Origins He-Man to show you guys not only the difference in size, but also the difference in colors as well. It almost comes across more when you're seeing it next to, well, him standing next to Origins He-Man, that the new Revelation He-Man, minus the S of course, seems to have more of a spray-on tan. We'll talk more about that in a second. And at the time of shooting this review, I just finished wrapping up Master Universe Revelation last night, breezed through the 5 episodes that made up the mini-series for at least part 1, and I think now we have to wait for part 2 for next year. I'm going to do my best to keep all my opinions of the cartoon out of this, and I certainly will avoid all spoilers if I possibly can. I will tell you, though, just a slight sneak peek of my feelings of the cartoon. I was overall pretty disappointed. It really wasn't the He-Man cartoon that I grew up loving as a kid, and I know that that sort of is the divisive thing that splits fans in half. People would say that there was time to expand on the other characters that made up the original Masters of the Universe folklore, but I still feel like He-Man and Skeletor should have played more bigger role in the series. Anyways, again, I'll keep my opinions out of this. Feel free, spoiler-free, mind you, to weigh in your thoughts of what you thought of the cartoon down below in the comments section. That being said, let's move on over to the accessories that come included with He-Man. We'll start first with a shield. A pretty nicely detailed shield, as you can see. It does have the straps on the back side of it, so of course it will fit around He-Man's forearm. But you can see it does have the little riveted points and painted nicely in there with the orange. I almost feel like the orange probably could have used a second coat. Maybe not leave immediately on lunch break. I would have stayed and maybe polished that up with a second coat. Anyways, it's a decent looking shield. I think it's a good size as well. You can take the shield and fit it onto He-Man's arm. You can really go on either side, really, but I like to put it on this side that has his arm guard already in place. Of course, you'll take the larger strap of the two, and that'll be the first entryway onto his forearm. Just sort of slide it in place, and then you can fit his hand just around the front grip. And it stays pretty good in place. Put that down. Of course, He-Man also comes included with his power sword. The power sword is just okay. It has elements to it that I like from the original Power Sword. In fact, actually, doing comparisons, we can have it looking next to the regular Origins Power Sword. And of course, the Power Sword from Origins suffered from the fact that it was only half of a sword, until, of course, we get the reissues that are going to come with a full sword. So at least Revelation He-Man has that beat by at least getting a double-sided sword. I almost feel like that the blade is a little too long. I get what they were wanting to go with, a more longer battle sword, but I kind of feel like the sword blade, or maybe it's this part right here, wasn't wide enough around the guard. Anyways, you can take the sword, and you can either fit it into his hand, or you can also fit it around to the back and holster it down the top of his shoulder bandolier. Kind of his torso armor that he's known for having. Slides very nicely in place. Of course, I did say you can also fit it into his hand. I can't really do that right now because he's got a closed fist, but he also comes with a couple of gripping hands as well. You can see that these hands accommodate both swapping it on this side and swapping it on this side. Although I'm probably more inclined to probably keep the flat hand on this side just because it holds the shield, I think, a little bit better. It's also a lot easier to put on there as well. If you put this hand in place, then I feel like you have to fight the strap around it. I prefer just to go with the relaxed hand myself. Well, let's go ahead and take the other hand off. Just wiggle it off the socket, pop it off, and then replace the one that we want to put in there. So at least now we can take He-Man's sword. By the power of Grayskull, you can fit that into He-Man's hand. I'm going to go ahead and actually just take the shield. Actually, you know what? I'll keep the shield in there for now. I'll work around the shield. The hands at least are soft enough of plastic, so you can just open up the grip like that. The sword then fits into his hand, and it fits pretty good, too. It doesn't feel like it's wibbling and wobbling. And there you got He-Man with both sword and shield in hand. So now we can have a look at the figure itself. There are things that I do like about the figure and what Mattel has done to it, and there's other aspects that I'm not super crazy about. I'll start with the biggest strike that I have against this figure. It's the head sculpt. I really don't feel like that's a great looking head sculpt for He-Man. And again, watching the Revelation cartoon last night, I don't feel like this fits the proper sizing of He-Man. He-Man was a beast in that cartoon, and I feel like just the proportions of this guy. Granted, I know that they're going to probably want to reuse the mold for other figures, so they can't have every single figure big and bulky like He-Man was in the cartoon. So of course they're probably going to be using a lot of the same similar molds like previous masters have in the past. I can get over that. I can't get over the fact that the face seems off. I always try to do this when I'm looking at a figure's head sculpt, and I think to myself, well, what's the part that I feel suffers the most? I don't even have to really do this. I think the part that suffers on the figure's head sculpt is his mouth. The top of his eyes and the rest of his hair isn't that bad at all, but then when you get to the mouth area, it feels like it comes up a little short. I don't know what I would have done differently, given him an expression. Not a grimaced face, because we've already got that with the Origins, but something different. Something doesn't deliver here for He-Man, and I feel like the head sculpt comes up just a little bit short. To at least its credit, though, the paint is pretty nicely applied to the figure. Even like the eyes, for example, have got the little reflection there on the eyeballs. Big, large eyebrows as well. And the hair as well, to its credit, is painted pretty good. It's kind of a dirty blonde. Some dirtier places than others, it actually kind of looks like there's paintbrush fibers stuck in He-Man's hair. But overall, I think the head sculpt works except for the mouth. And it doesn't work from any side that I see it at either. I don't know. Something about this area right here is bothering me about the figure's head sculpt. Right there, it's not so bad. But it's not like I'm going to be displaying the figure with my finger in front of its mouth the whole time. So I'm going to, sooner or later, have to take my hand away. Now, as for the rest of the body, it's pretty much traditional looking He-Man. If I could really look at it at a cosmetic level of things, I feel like the plastic seems to change itself quite a lot. He-Man sort of has like a sweaty torso for some strange reason. He's not sweaty in the face, and nor is he in the arms either. It's almost like the arms work well for the face, but it's not the quite same color. The arms are more of a darker spray-on tan. The face is more lighter, but it goes with the torso. But then the torso looks all clammy and sticky and sweaty. I'm not sure why it had to be like that. Did they deliberately want to make the figure look sweaty? And if that was the case, wouldn't they want to have made it sweaty across the entire figure? Why are we talking about He-Man's sweat right now? So I will say, like, the coloring of the plastic does change a lot on He-Man. His arms aren't the same coloring as his torso, and his arms aren't the same coloring as his face, and it sort of seems like there's different kinds of plastic that they use for the construction of the figure. Now, He-Man does change things up a little bit. He's got, of course, his gauntlet on the one wrist, but then he changes things up when he gets to this side. He has this kind of arm guard. It's nice that they updated the armor, at least from his costume standpoint, without feeling the need to change too much up here. This is more traditional looking He-Man. By bringing in this little arm guard, it does modernize the character just a little bit from what little we see of him in the cartoon. You can remove this really if you want to as well. Just go ahead and take the hand off, just remove it from the socket, and you can go ahead and slide the guard off completely if you really want to. Unfortunately, though, removing it, you'll see right now, it's absent then of a wrist guard, the little wrist bracelet. I wish that they could have included a second one of those, but I guess the problem with that is it would have just been a little ring of plastic that I'm sure would have gotten lost. So let's go ahead and just slide that back on. Actually, you know what? For its credit, it looks pretty good. It's nice sculpted. I'm assuming that's supposed to be like a leather material, and then you've got the guard plating of the armor on the top. So go ahead, just slide that back on his hand. And to prevent that from sliding off further, we go ahead and just pop the hand back into place, just like that. He does have, of course, the traditional looking He-Man. It's a little bit different. It's kind of more closer to being an H here. But I think as a modern take for He-Man, I don't think it's not off-putting looking at it necessarily. The use of this crimson metallic red that they use really does look good against the backdrop of the gray. It's almost like a blue-based gray, too. And technically, you could detach this on the back like regular He-Man figures. You just detach the straps on either side. Just remove that completely if you want to. Again, why is he so... He's so porous, too. He's so porous. So strange. Then looking at the lower half of the figure, of course, you've got the furrier loincloth. If you're curious what it looks like underneath, I don't know why you would want to, but there it is. They've molded brown plastic underneath it, and then of course they put the skirting underneath. I like the fact that the first skirt is longer. It's not super short like this, so it actually does look like a true loincloth. The coloring of the yellow also seems to jive pretty close to the bracelets as well as the arm guard that he has too, so at least those colors stay pretty consistent with one another. But what's the deal with all this spray on tan? It's everywhere on this figure. I mean, again, when we're looking at, I'm just going to move this guy over for a second. We want to bring in the Origins He-Man. Say what you will, of course, about the head sculpt, but I don't have any issues at all with the coloring of the skin tone that they used for this He-Man. I wish they could have used this on this instead of having to rely on paint. If they had just molded it in the correct color instead of feeling the need to paint over top of it, I don't think He-Man would have looked so sprayed on tan as a result of what you're seeing here. Lastly, we'll have a look at again at his boots. Of course, they've brought in this case, unlike the Origins that would have had this more like a yellowish coloring, they've kept the fur at least consistent with the loincloth, and I don't really have any issues with that either. He does have pegels on the undersides of his feet, so of course if you wanted to just put him on a display stand, you can certainly do that. And it seems as well like they've colored the soles on the bottoms of his boots a different color from the tops of the boots. So I like that they've done that as well. So let's have a look at the articulation on He-Man here. The head rotates all the way around. You can see that despite the length of his hair, it doesn't limit what you can do with the head posability. So it moves down, it moves up, and you can also slightly rock it back and forth as well. It also seems when you're seeing it from the side that his head sort of is brought a little too far forward. Instead of actually the neck being straight up here, the neck leans on an angle. So it causes He-Man to kind of look like he's got a hunchback. There's really no way to fix that. You can bring the head up this way, and I still, maybe it's a little bit better. It's a little bit better, but not by much. It looks like he's got almost a Rob Liefeld kind of torso drawn here. The upper torso is on a ball joint, so that's a nice touch. You can rotate that all the way around. As for the arms, you can bring those out at a comfortable 90-degree angle bend. You can rotate the arms, of course, all the way around. You can swivel at the bicep. Double hinge on the elbow. Although the size of He-Man's biceps sort of limit what bending you can actually get from that second hinge. You can bend it here fine, but when it comes to this point, you're really not going to be able to get it unless you bring the arm a little bit more forward like this, and then you can utilize that double hinge joint. Kind of looks like he's about to brush his hair. Hands rotate all the way around, and there's also a hinge joint happening there too, so you can bring those back and forth too. Let's bring his arm down. It looks a little awkward. I have noticed on this He-Man too, and if you have picked this figure up for yourself, let me know if you have similar issues. This arm seems to sit a little more flush to his body. This arm, on the other hand, I brought the hinge joint as far down as I possibly can get it, and yet it seems like it's... Maybe I'm just going to have to fight it a little bit more. There we go. That's a lot more effort than I really wanted to put into it. It's tight. I don't know why it's as tight as it is, and it almost looks like there's a little bit of marring that's been done to the plastic. Sweaty He-Man. He does have a waist swivel, going back to his articulation. His legs split out. You can get a full splits on He-Man. You can also bring his legs forward and back. He has a swivel 3/4 of the way up the thigh. He also has a double hinge on the knee. You can rotate the boot all the way around. And then when it comes to his foot articulation, you can of course hinge those back and forth, and you can also ankle pivot them as well. Again, I'm not really sure what I feel about when it comes to He-Man here. There's things that I like about it as a larger scale He-Man. Let's just get his legs. His legs are fighting a little bit with me here. As a larger scale He-Man, I think it works. There's aspects, though, Sort of reminds me of like the 2000 series He-Man, kind of the way that his build looks. Some have said that his arms come across a little too long, or maybe a little too short. Maybe it was the short proportions that were throwing some people off. I don't find his proportions are that terrible. I just sort of question the kind of plastic that they've used. Again, like his torso seems like it's a different plastic than every other piece that's on the figure. And then, of course, there's the head sculpt. The head sculpt really isn't working for me. It wasn't working for me either when I looked at Skeletor, when I will be looking at Skeletor, but when at least I got both figures home. Skeletor, when I took him out of the packaging, he works a little bit better, I think, in hand, out of packaging. He-Man, I feel like I feel the same way as I felt when I looked at the figure inside the packaging. He's lacking something. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with his mouth. The rest of his body's okay. His head sculpt is passable, but something below his nose is offsetting to me, and it really ruins the look of the character. In some ways, my feelings for the He-Man figure that we looked at in this review sort of mirror my feelings that I had when watching Master Universe Revelation. In both cases, I walked in with pretty high expectations, high hopes. I was going to walk away pretty happy with what I've seen. And in both cases, unfortunately, quite the opposite happened. I walked away feeling deflated, slightly disappointed. Now, the He-Man figure has its own problems, as well as Master Universe Revelation has its own problems. And I'm not going to really talk too much about the cartoon. For those that have seen it already have their own personal opinions, and if you did manage to get through the 5-part miniseries, please don't put comments down below spoiling anything for those that haven't seen the cartoon yet. We'll talk maybe about that in a separate video, or I'm not even sure if I'm going to do a review recap of the cartoon. But we can certainly talk about He-Man here that has positive points going for it, because again, Revelation had positive things going for it. One of the positive things I could certainly say, because we're not going to just sprinkle the negative in here, He-Man had a pretty good voice actor doing his voice. Some of the other voice actors, though, including Mark Hamill, I felt didn't fit the part properly. But He-Man's was pretty good, what little we actually see of him. For the figure, though, proportionally, I think he's got the proper build for what you would want for He-Man. He can't obviously be the big, bulky, gorilla-sized He-Man that we get from the cartoon. And, of course, they want to use the body proportions for other figures, so it makes some sense that He-Man's going to be scaled the same size. The coloring, for the most part, is okay. There are things about the figure, like his arms and his legs have a lot of excessive spray tan, and then his middle torso that matches his face, at least with the skin tone. The torso's kind of clammy, and it looks sweaty, and He-Man's head sculpt, of course, being the biggest problem I have with this figure, it's lacking something. Now, why I'm also showing you at the end of this review, while we have the figure on the rotisserie cooking away, on the back of the packaging, you can see He-Man sort of in quite a heroic-looking pose. Maybe if they had done the face similar to that. I almost feel like he's got too much chin. That's one big problem with the figure. And he also doesn't have any expression on his face. He sort of has almost like a boy face. Like he's a man-child. He's got a man-child face. Maybe that's it. Something, though, is coming up a little short on He-Man's head. But the rest of his body isn't terrible. And even though I'm not crazy about the sword being the proportions that it is, I feel like the guard probably could have been a little bit wider. Those are all like little minor nitpicks. The greatest takeaway, if I was to package this up and give it to you across the counter, I would hope the takeaway would be most of the He-Man figure is pretty good. The head sculpt is just, it's okay. It's almost below average. I feel they could have done something better with the head sculpt. Have you picked up, though, the Master Universe Revelation He-Man? And if you have, let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of it. And if you have seen, of course, Master Universe Revelation, minus the S, because I keep wanting to call it Revelations, let me know down below in the comment section without any spoilers, please, and thank you. If you guys are new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on, and make sure you're keeping your peepers peeled to this channel, because we will be looking at more Masters Universe Revelation figures, including Skeletor, whose review will be coming up right after this one, or may have something kind of dividing in between. I don't know. It may come up probably the next day. So make sure you're keeping your peepers peeled to this channel. And thanks for watching. See you guys next time.